Hello, chiropractors, slayers of subluxation, unleashers of the imprisoned impulse. I am Dr. Anthony Pellegrino from ChiroEdge, and welcome to the Chiropractic Research Breakdown, where we break down the most relevant chiropractic science, philosophy to empower you with the ammo and certainty necessary to change your community from the inside out. We have three very good articles we're going to be going over today. One is going to be Resolution of Failure to Thrive, Gastroesophageal Reflux Disease, GERD, Infantile Colic, and Breastfeeding Difficulties Following Chiropractic Care to Reduce Vertebral Subluxation, a case study and review of literature from the Journal of Pediatric, Maternal, and Family Health. We have a review of literature coming from the World Spine Care Organization, whatever it is. I'll go over it later. That looks at the biopsychosocial risk factors associated with common spinal disorders. And we have a third article, and, well, that's a good one too. I look forward to having you guys hear all about it. Anyway, let's get right into it. As always, we'll have this literature available via handout and branded social media posts for your practice, where you can receive a free trial of getting this information straight to your inbox every week, ready for you to hand deliver to your practice members with your logo and office information. You can get that free trial at chiroedgemedia.com. All right, this article I wanted to go over with you guys is from Frontiers in Neuroscience, published on February 7th of 2018, and I'm really excited about this because it's called The Vagus Nerve at the Interface of the Microbiota-Gut-Brain Axis. The vagus nerve in the interface of the microbiota-gut-brain axis. They're discussing the role of the nervous system and the microbes in the gut, and the communication that those two have together, and basically how any dysfunction or interference between those can relate to different issues. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys a couple quotes here. All right. The perturbation of this axis, the microbiota-gut-brain axis, the axis is involved in the pathophysiology of gastrointestinal disorders such as irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, which are biopsychosocial diseases. The vagus nerve is the principal component of the parasympathetic nervous system and is considered as the sixth sense because of its role in interoceptive awareness. The vagus nerve is able to sense the microbiota to transfer this gut information to the central nervous system, where it is integrated and then to generate an adapted or inappropriate response. The latter could perpetuate a pathological condition of the digestive tract or favor neurodegenerative disorders. Wow, this is in the introduction. This is not a chiropractic paper. This is in Frontiers of Neuroscience, and what they are saying right off the bat is that miscommunications between the nervous system and between the digestive organs can relate to pathological conditions and neurodegenerative disorders. Wow, if you are not aware of the chiropractic implications of that introductory sentence, I am so sorry. Come look at all of our past videos, all of them, and learn about how the digestive system and the nervous system are intricately related, and how, through chiropractic care, addressing for subluxation interferes with the function of the nervous system and its ability to control things like the digestive system. An abnormal vagal tone is described in IBS and IBD. Targeting the vagus nerve could restore homeostasis in such diseases. In particular, vagus nerve stimulation, approved for the depression and epilepsy and for its anti-inflammatory properties, should be of interest. Of course, because this is a medical paper, what they're looking at is implanting something and stimulating the vagus nerve that way. What we know, what we've seen, is that chiropractic care, by correcting interference to the nervous system, especially because of the proximity between the atlas C1 vertebrae, as well as the proximity of the atlas to the vagus nerve, as well as aberrant proprioceptive information going from the upper cervical spine to the brain, causing an imbalance of the parasympathetic nervous system, that the vagus nerve will be dysfunctional, most likely in the presence of subluxation, and by correcting that very gently, very specifically, using specific scientific chiropractic adjustments, that homeostasis, that proper function, that proper balance between the between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system can be restored. Now that is exciting. The human gut contains more microorganisms than cells of the body. That I didn't know, but that was absolutely just like mind-blowing to me. This communication between the brain and the microbiota is bidirectional. The multiple pathways, is bidirectional, though multiple pathways. Neural through the vagus nerve and/or spinal cord, endocrine through the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis, immune, which is cytokinase, and metabolic short-chain fatty acids. Okay, so this is exactly why I'm excited. We have broken down the role of subluxation in the HPA axis, okay, on numerous occasions to keep it as simple as possible. When in the presence of subluxation, misalignments of the spine, there's a bombardment of aberrant proprioceptive information up the spinal cord to basically the cortex. The cortex has a ton of influence over the limbic system, which specifically has a ton of influence over the HPA axis, and we can actually measure and see changes of that. We've done research breakdowns, we've done Cardio Edge newsletters in the past regarding the role of subluxation for the proper function of the HPA axis. So when this paper discusses the role of vagal tone, right, the role of the communication, the bidirectional communication between not the digestive organs, but not only the digestive organs, but the actual microbiota of the body. As a chiropractor, you just have to be excited here. The vagus nerve contains 80% afferent fibers and 20% efferent fibers. 80% of the information that's transmitted through the vagus nerve is not going from the brain to the body, but from the body back up to the brain. So interference in the system here can literally distort the brain's perception of the environment and what is going on in the body, right? It's not just the bone on nerve sending messages down the arm. It's not just the brain saying, hey, the digestive organ should have peristalsis, and then it gets interfered on the way out. But more importantly, it's the way up. The brain is acting properly. The brain is performing properly. It's just responding to information that is incorrect. It's just responding to information that is incorrect. Maybe even the efferent, the going out signals are functioning properly and aren't distorted. But it's based off of incorrect information, right? It's like if somebody told you that the stock market is going to go up 700% in the next week, you would not be wrong to put all of your money into the stock market at that moment. But if that information was incorrect, right, even though your action was appropriate, it was based off of the incorrect information, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. This absolutely makes me so fantastic. They break down gut-to-brain interactions. There was some other stuff that I wanted to talk about here. They start to go into the role of stress in the vagus nerve and the microbiota. The effect of stress on the GI tract is well known. Stress through its neuromediators, corticotropin-releasing factor, and related peptide urocortins, acting on their G proteins coupled CRF receptors located in the brain and the GI tract, increases intestinal permeability and modifies the gut microbiota. These two factors are involved in the pathophysiology of IBS and IBD. Just so excited here. Chronic early life stress induces dysbiosis in rats via modifications of intestinal permeability, which may later sensitize adult rats to visceral hypersensitivity. Classically, stress inhibits the vagus nerve and stimulates the sympathetic nervous system through autonomic-related projection neurons of the PVH to the dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus nerve and sympathetic preganglionic neurons of the spinal cord. Since the vagus nerve has anti-inflammatory properties through the afferent and efferent fibers, stress has thus pro-inflammatory properties. Chiropractic care isn't about reducing stress. It is not about, and you can argue with me on this, and I don't care. It's not about putting us in a bubble, right, and saying, eat this, don't eat this, drink this much water. It's not about saying, oh, you know what, we can make you feel much better if you just live in this bubble and never experience any of the stresses in your life. What it is about, rather, is reducing and correcting interference in the nerve system that stops our body from adequately being able to adapt and respond to such stress. Dr. Christopher Kent from On Purpose, who is my chiropractic celebrity crush, I'm sorry, breaks down the difference between eustress, right, good stress and bad stress, and how by specific scientific chiropractic adjustments, it allows our body to better be able to adapt to positive and negative stresses, and how with stress our body can actually grow. Anyway, this was the vagus nerve and the interface of the microbiota-gut-brain axis. What I want you guys to take from this research today is that they know, right? You can have whatever medical doctor tell your practice members, your patients, not to go see a chiropractor because they one time saw some neck injury that wasn't even chiropractic, blah, 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 or they had a professor that told them about all these horror stories when they were in medical school 20 years ago. You can have that, but the bottom line is that they know what we know. They just don't know what we do. So have certainty in knowing that yes, everything we do is neurologically based. If you can just influence the balance of the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, if you can measure and see through measuring the changes in the autonomic system, specifically through thermal evaluations. If you can measure the difference as well as dyskinesis, which is another arm of subluxation, which is through something like SEMG. If you can see and measure these, show it with HRV, we know that we are making these changes. We know that the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems are functioning better. And when we can say, hey, you know what? If you've been suffering with these terrible digestive issues for years and years and years and years and years, and it's because of this miscommunication, which the medical doctors know between the microbiota, the gut, the brain, and if we can restore that proper communication, we don't know that any symptoms going to improve, but we just know that they are going to live better. All right, this next article I want to discuss with you guys is from a journal called PLOSOne. It's called A Scoping Review of Biopsychosocial Risk Factors and Comorbidities for Spinal Common Disorders. Say that 5 times fast. It's from an organization called the World Spine Care, which looks like it's just a conglomerate of some DCs, a media company, and Elon Musk and Solar City going and do scoliosis screenings, some screenings and things like that for third world countries and other organizations. Just kind of have to quickly glimpse at their website. Doesn't seem there are a bunch of DCs on the board. Doesn't seem like they're the most principled of docs out there, but hey, they're spreading the message of spinal health, I guess. The question is what intervention would they recommend? And chiropractic might not be number one there, but hey, whatever. Let's go over the research itself. Basically what they're looking at here is they are looking at spinal disorders, and they did a review of literature that is looking for risk factors. What do they see that could cause these issues, these spine disorders, and what comorbidities are there going to be? A good example of what a comorbidity is, it's associated diseases. So, people who are obese are more likely to have cardiovascular disease. Those are comorbidities of one another. And they're going to look at this through different spine conditions. Some things of note is that the prevalence of spine disorders has sharply risen since 1990, and it is a leading cause of global years lived with disability in spinal disorders. Some spinal conditions may be associated with health behaviors such as smoking, high BMI, insufficient physical activity, and more general health comorbidities such as anxiety, depression, diabetes, cardiovascular disorders, respiratory problems, and GI diseases. So this is right from the introduction. So this is basically what they had found. They'd seen these associated risk factors. They'd wanted to go ahead and do a review of the literature and get some more information there. So they broke down the sections of spinal disorders into a couple different groups, and we're going to go through these. The first is spinal pain of unknown origin. These are just people with neck pain, back pain, or low back pain, and they just for no particular reason. Risk factors for non-specific back pain would be psychosocial work variables of high job demands, basically high stress positions, or highly monotonous work. So when you meet people with very high stress jobs, as you know, or people with highly monotonous jobs, it's extra important to get them checked for subluxation because they're more likely to develop these back pains. what's pretty cool here is that there was a study that they reviewed that was specifically for combat aircrew. And what they found was that the high gravitational pull or high gravitational forces of flying these jets made them much more susceptible to neck pain, which I would assume some like minor whiplash type injuries. Comorbidities, basically people who have these non-specific back pains, are more susceptible to just overall ill health and just general pain all over their body. Risk factors: individuals with poor mental health are more likely to have this pain. In children, females who carry backpacks are very likely to postural changes and having this nonspecific mid-back pain. Overexposure to body vibration, such as working a jackhammer, makes you more susceptible to low back pain. So basically, if you have a fighter pilot, they're going to have neck pain. If you have a girl with a backpack, she's going to have mid-back pain. And if they rock a jackhammer, they're going to have low back pain. The comorbidities for back pain include psychiatric conditions, diabetes, headaches, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, cardiovascular conditions, sciatica, pain in other body sites, and musculoskeletal injuries. This is part of the reason that what we talk about a lot is things like prevention. It's not necessarily about the symptom, but when we have these comorbidities, it's, a chicken or the egg here. I'm sure in some cases the back pain causes one thing, cardiovascular problems, and in other cases it's the other way around. But if we can make sure we have a preventative care, seeing children from birth to ensure that they're going to overcome many of these different physical, chemical, emotional stresses they're going to encounter in their lives, that's what's really important. I don't necessarily know that's the approach that they're taking in this paper, but that's how I'm interpreting the data. Another group that they put together isn't non-specific pain, it's spinal syndromes. So this would be things like sciatica, whiplash injuries, pelvic pain associated with pregnancy, etc. They found that obesity, being obese, being overweight, manual labor, and current smoking habits, those individuals who fell in those groups were more likely to experience sciatica, which is, makes sense. Comorbidities, once again, psychological disorders, back pain, headaches, widespread chronic pain, degeneration, radicular symptoms, cranial nerve or brainstem disturbances, dizziness and dysphagia, fatigue, and high obesity. That makes sense. I mean, psychological, we talk about all the time. The emotional, the neurological implications of subluxation, of spinal problems. We look at things like back pain, yes, obviously. Headaches, yes. Widespread chronic pain, yes. Degeneration, yes. Radicular symptoms, well, I mean, they're looking at sciatica, so by definition, right? Cranial nerve or brainstem disturbance, yes. Dizziness, yes. Dysphagia, yes. Obesity, yes, because they can't move around because they're in so much pain. In terms of looking at things like disc herniations, they found smoking was a risk. Males had a higher rate of radicular symptoms. So this is basically just breaking down and looking at each of these different categories. It just really brings a lot of light into why we should take such a preventative model, right? If you're not seeing kids, if you're not going out and telling people that, listen, if you have a high-stress job, if you work hard, you need to see a chiropractor because these things can come down the line. If you're just waiting for people to get in accidents, if you're just chasing ambulances, you're doing your community a disservice because you're waiting till it's too late, because we know that this stuff is going to happen. Unless we get ahead of it, it's going to be a problem. It's going to affect families. It's going to affect individuals. It's going to affect our economy. It's going to affect every little thing. So bottom line, get off your ass, get out into your community, and start telling people about chiropractic. Start telling them about what's going to happen if they don't get this checked. And don't sit there all willy-nilly until they have a back pain, walk into your office, get 3 adjustments, and leave. Tell the story. All right, this next study I want to go over with you guys is from the Journal of Pediatric, Maternal, and Family Health. It is a case study, as with most of the things published in Journal of Pediatric, Maternal, and Family Health. And it's called Resolution of Failure to Thrive, GERD, or Gastroesophageal Reflux Disease, Infantile Colic, and Breastfeeding Difficulties Following Chiropractic Care to Reduce Vertebral Subluxation. Case study and review of literature. Now, this is by Drs. Ian Stuhlman of Florida and Dr. Joel Alcantara. Both these guys are big heavy hitters in the ICPA, and I was really looking forward to reading this case study because, I know Dr. Ian. I also know Dr. Alcantara. Both have met a few times, as well as just reading what they've written, not only in research, but also, through the various social networking and interwebs. And I love how carefully they always choose their words, how intentional they are with everything they say, both these guys individually, as well as obviously together, and much more intentional than myself and something I'm working on. But there's some really good nuggets that I knew I was going to pull out of this, and I'll definitely bring those up to you guys. So this case study is about a 3.5-year-old girl who was presented for chiropractic consultation. When we talk about case studies, I really like they had a good paragraph in here right in the introduction. It puts the way I feel about case studies as well. Obviously, you can bring this up, and we know that case studies don't mean proof. It really bothers me when some of these clickbait sites for chiropractors say, chiropractic proven to help, constipation. And it's a case study. Like, no, that's not proven. That's not what that means. It is proven that it helped with this one individual case, but that's not what that word is for. And when we have research and literature that says things like that, and it's read by any other profession or any person who really understands science or wants to think for themselves, it just really makes us look bad. But they really break this down on how I feel about case studies. And it says, although there is argument in the medical literature that the obscure nature of many case reports make them of very little value to the average practitioner, we are of the opinion that that is not the case in chiropractic. In keeping with the paradigm of constructivism, that sharing of new experiences, challenges, or discoveries is a learning and constructive process, and new information is linked to prior knowledge. We are of the humble opinion that case reports are an essential element to the development and refinement of chiropractic culture and lays the foundation for our knowledge base and vehicle for chiropractic education. I couldn't have said that any better. Now, when we have these case reports, the goal is to then take this and really study it on a larger scale, right? Come in there and say, oh my gosh, if we have 50 case reports on constipation, maybe we should start doing some larger studies. And unfortunately, that's not really as much of the way that things happen in chiropractic. There really is not much money, really, unfortunately, in chiropractic research. The money is in the care and the clinical aspect. Whereas if you look at something like medicine, right, the pharmaceutical industry is doing their research, and then they're selling these pills. So the research really, if you want to apply that model to chiropractic, should be happening from the techniques themselves. The technique gets researched for themselves, then they go have that and teach people how to better do their technique. Unfortunately, the research isn't really about developing it too often. It's more about just justifying what's there. There's Holder Research Institute for TRT, which does a really great job. I think No Technique takes this to heart and does a better job than CBP, quite honestly. I love the research that comes out from there. That's just a little bit of my segue. It has nothing to do with the current case study. I just kind of wanted to go through with you guys and explain my thoughts on case reports and the future of chiropractic research. But anyway, a 3.5-year-old female was presented by her parent for chiropractic consultation and possible care. Absolutely, right? Can't take that for granted. According to the patient's mother, her child had suffered from severe infantile colic, had breastfeeding difficulties, acid reflux, and had been medically diagnosed as failure to thrive. History revealed the patient's mother expressed contractions at 30 weeks of gestation and was medically placed on bed rest for the rest of her pregnancy. The patient's birthing was described by her mother as easy and included the use of an epidural. Yeah, we need to educate on this, right? Because if you're using an epidural, it's by definition not easy, right? You just don't feel it. And the question is whether or not it was choice or whether it was emergency or whatever it wants to be. But the thing is that there's a disconnect here because we know that even though mom's not feeling it during birth, with an epidural, there's going to be manual traction. There's going to be forceps or vacuum or whatever it is. And they didn't describe any of this in this case, so I'm assuming it's manual traction. But by definition, when mom isn't able to feel, that's going to have to happen. So while it may have been easier, it's not easier on baby. So we need to definitely go ahead and educate, right? And I know that Dr. Ian, the skateboard out of his office, did a very good job, I'm sure, educating on birth trauma as well. Really opened up mom's eyes to, what could have been happening during this time. But obviously that happens past the initial consultation, right? That education happens over time. So physical examination, not surprisingly, revealed a small baby with hypotonia or decreased muscle tone, noticeable left restricted cervical spine rotation. There was upper cervical spine tonicity. They did gentle motion palpation at the top. They found basically subluxation looks like it's just at C1. They started adjusting using a sustained contact. So following the patient's first visit, the patient's mother reported that her daughter's breastfeeding latch improved, one visit. Also reported by her mother that she was beginning to reach for toys following the second visit, and she began to play more. The patient's mother also described her other firsts, such as rolling over from her stomach to her back as she started babbling. She started eating more with mild improvements in fussiness by her third set of spinal adjustments. By the fourth visit, the patient's feeding has improved 50%, an increase from 2.5 ounces to 3.5 ounces per feeding. Her acid reflux had improved. No fussiness was noted. After 8 visits over 2 months, the patient's pediatrician noted that the patient gained enough weight, 2 pounds in 2 months, that she was no longer concerned and canceled a referral to her GI specialist. For several months thereafter, a patient continued chiropractic care at a frequency of once monthly based on a wellness paradigm. At the time of this writing, the patient is a typically developing preschooler with no discernible deficits or delays. I'm going to repeat that. As of this writing, this patient is a typically developing preschooler with no discernible deficits or delays. 100% that is a life changed. If you see kids, you see this in your practice every day. If you don't, go to an ICPA seminar and start. And don't just start seeing kids because it's cool. Okay? I mean, it is cool. It's awesome. Kids are way better than adults. But don't do it because you want to be part of this crunchy community. Like, do your homework. Learn how to adjust kids. Go do the extra work. Go to more than your 2 classes in school after you haven't done it for 10 years. Get out there. Go to seminars. If you haven't seen Jeannie Ohm speak, do that. Dr. Jeannie Ohm speak, president of the ICPA, do that. Right? Get out there, because the more that we can deliver consistent results, the more that we can deliver specific scientific chiropractic adjustments, the more lives are going to change. The better we're able to educate, more importantly, that no, this wasn't an easy birth, right? That regardless of the type of birth, there's so much tension, so much trauma that happens to the head and neck of baby. Until we can educate, every time we educate on that, every moment, every handout we give on the office, shameless plug for ChiroEdge, everything that we say to every person, it is there to not only change that individual's life, but change the health of a community. This is a life restored, 3.5 years old. Imagine when she was 13, when she was 15, when she was 23, when she was 33, what her life would have looked like if she didn't end up in this chiropractic office. I'll leave you with that on this. Thank you. All right, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Chiropractic Research Breakdown. One more time, I was your host, Dr. Anthony Pellegrino. If you guys got some value out of this today, please go ahead, subscribe, rate, review on iTunes or your favorite podcast website. You can also find us on Facebook at ChiroEdge. And as always, we do have free trials of the ChiroEdge service, which is 3 social media posts based on the research we break down every week, as well as 3 patient-oriented newsletters for you to hand out in your office every single week. We'll keep that direct to your inbox. Everything includes your office branding, your logo, your information, so that it is specific to you and not to us, because the point is not to make us look good, but to rather have you be able to change your community, and we want to partner with you on that. You can find that at chiroedgemedia.com. Hope you guys all have a great week. Keep slaying those subluxations and serving the masses.